Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. I figured it's time to get started, so I'll get stuck into it. And so, let's just turn this on. And so what I'd like to talk to you today is about mobile policing at the roadside, citations and accident reports directly from your phone. And if you were listening to the keynote this morning, you would have heard a bit of a taster of that. So the session is interactive. There is Me Too on it. So we'll go in there and make sure that that's up and running. If it doesn't work, I might just get you to put your hands up or stuff like that. So sometimes there's always technical difficulties in life. So every time I go into a presentation, I'd like to know what's happening so that you're kind of like, hey, where are we in this? And so basically, I want to talk about the keynote recap, kind of what's in it for you, then go through and talk about how did we get to here, what's the big picture, what's this all about, looking at a little bit of detail of attending a vehicle accident and learning about what's different, integrating with your agency, a little bit about the IT perspective of it, availability and what's on the horizon. So there's a lot on there, let's get started. So the keynote recap. You may have seen the keynote this morning with Dan and Kaylin, where I had a brief taster around what this was about. But basically, for me, mobility is the leading edge of the Smart Cities initiative because it's literally there on people's devices. You know, we're all going to be, sort of using mobility. And so today, and in that meeting, I just had a high-level discussion of Intergraph on-duty resolve. So we all got to see it really quickly. And this session is about elaborating on that. And I'll be talking about the thinking behind on-duty. I'll be showing a bit of a preview of on-duty resolve in a scenario, how it fits law enforcement in IT environments and what's on the horizon. And I think this topic, while it is a bit of a police flavour, I've been talking to lots of customers from EMS and fire during this conference, and I have a bit of a story around that as well. So, I'll do this questionnaire. So there is a Me Too in here, and then if we have some technical glitches, in fact, I think I'd rather just ask, are there any customers in the audience who would be looking at sort of moving beyond the unit mobility, which I would categorise as in-vehicle, so those are those ruggedised laptops that you have in there. How many of you guys, and just raise your hands, if say within the next 12 to 24 months, would you guys be looking at moving to device mobility, mobilising those officers? So I see a smattering of hands, if you can, I'm going to do, so there's about 4 over there, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay. So of this audience, there's probably about 40% of people who would be looking at mobilising the officer. And for me, I spent a lot of my time being deployed at New Zealand Police. They went through a big journey of mobilising the car first, and then they realised that, well, what happens when people go outside the vehicle? How do they still get access to information when they're in someone's house, when they're at the roadside next to a vehicle that they've pulled over? So let's have a look at what's in it for you. Like, what's the point of on-duty resolve and what's the benefits? And this is kind of the succinct slide about what it's about. It's a mobile policing app that gives police officers guided workflows for queries and reports. And it also applies to, I'm not sure what that was. It also applies eventually to fire and EMS. And so today, I'm going to be talking about road patrols, which is around citations and accident reports. I'm also going to be talking about bookings, searches to Web RMS to pre-populate those reports, and field interviews. And a way for me to differentiate that from Mobile Responder is Mobile Responder gets you to the event, On Duty looks after the reporting you have to do at the event. All right. So the benefits for you, sort of chucked up here, for me, the intent is focusing on workflows that make it easy to capture information without a laptop. So you're at the roadside, you're on the beach, you're in a premise. If you're in a vehicle and you've already got the laptop, then that's going to be full of information, but you're always going to be away from that laptop. It also helps you to retrieve information to complete those reports fast. So you're going to be scanning driver's licenses. You're going to be doing queries to your record management system. And you're going to have queries that you've already looked up. And so the intent is, how do I get all this stuff done really fast at the roadside so that I don't have to do stuff back at the station? And finally, it uses the information from the device sensors. So a mobile phone or a tablet has location information via the GPS. It has a camera so we can take photos of evidence. It has a microphone so we can do voice dictation. And all of that stuff helps an officer or a field officer in the field get all that information really quickly. Okay, so that's kind of like a taster of on-duty interview. But there's a bit of a strategy or a story behind this. And for me, I call that the connected officer. And this concept of the connected officer really puts the officer at the heart of the development. And when I say development, I mean the heart of how all of our apps really interact with each other. And it starts with command, so there's major event planning and communications. So if there's a big event, which could be, it could be a protest, it could be an earthquake, it could be a planned event, such as the Olympics, there's always some planning that happens in that space. And then from there, there's the respond side of stuff, which we've seen with Mobile Responder or MPS, that is being dispatched and being aware of what's around me. Then the next bit is the bit resolve, hence the name On Duty Resolve. And that's really around paperwork, queries, tasks, the things you have to do in the field to kind of get the job done. And then finally, you have to submit that information to your record management system. So there's a bit of a story around what that could look like, and so that's all around integration. And then there's reporting. So at the other end of it, you have to measure your success. And that could include how many people did we pull over in a certain area, through to how many accidents have happened at a certain part of the area that we're patrolling. And then that feeds back into all the command stuff. So yeah, for me, this is kind of a succinct way of saying that I appreciate that there's a bit of a loop around what we do. And so the plan is we put officers at the heart of our development. We're not focusing just on the product, we're really focusing on how people use it. We consider what those workflows span across those apps. So we know that, if you're going to be being dispatched somewhere, you already know its location, you already know the event, you already know the people. So how do we get that information into the rest of the process? We create apps that are in sync with each other and are aware of the other Hexagon apps that you might have on your device. We also know that there's going to be third-party integration. So, it isn't just a Hexagon story. You guys just don't use Hexagon software. There's third-party products that you're using, and we acknowledge that. And we can measure the success of what's going around. So that's the big picture. All right, so how did we get to this Intergraph On Duty Resolve? And basically, it was inspired really by New Zealand Police. And New Zealand Police aren't here this year, but they were here last year. If you managed to hear the CIO, Jevon McSkimming, he had a session and he talked about the benefits that they had in developing their app On Duty. And for me, this is kind of the key value proposition, is officers used to do a lot of stuff and they were doing it manually. They were doing it by paper. They were always using radio to chat to comms and say, can you look up a vehicle? Who is this person? Run a driver's license, run a vehicle plate. And they were taking a lot of time doing that. And so when they moved all of those queries to the phone, when they moved doing traffic crash or accident reports to the phone, when they moved doing their citations to the phone, they ended up saving that million hours of productivity savings. But in practice, 1 hour per officer per shift. That's the value that they receive from their on duty. And for me, this was the one that I was blown away with. That error rate around citations from 43% to less than 1%. They had a team of 100 people sitting there in the back office, manually going through those tickets and saying, oh, we got the date wrong, or we got the whatever wrong. The app doesn't get things like date and time wrong. So then they didn't have those errors. And then finally, that bottom point was providing access to records and freeing up the airtime. So they used to do 400,000 queries over the radio, and as soon as they moved that to the app, they did 1.7 million. So there's a lot of demand from officers in the field who want to know information who couldn't, because the radio was always like sort of a bit busy. Okay. Wow, I'm really flying through this. I might have to speak slower. The next bit is looking at attending a vehicle accident, so let's get stuck in. So I put this slide up here to say that this is a technical preview. I'm showing you Intergraph on duty resolve today because it's very exciting, and we have plans about launching that later on in the year. So that's just a little bit of a... Okay, so the scenario that I wanted to walk through is we have officers. They are going to be dispatched via mobile responder. They're at the scene of an accident caused by a drunk driver. Seems a reasonable scenario. We're going to work on the accident report together. We're going to complete a citation report, and we're going to interview a witness. So the first part is starting the vehicle accident report. And really that's capturing the accident details, capturing the vehicle involved, associating an occupant to that vehicle, adding a location, and capturing photo evidence. So that's kind of the big picture. And the first thing is capturing the accident details. So in here, you can see in the accident details, that's where you would say what type of accident it was, what was at the scene, did anybody get hurt, all those normal things you'd expect to put in your accident report, they're all in there. And then you can also, so it's a pretty straightforward UI. The intent of the user interface, kind of counterintuitively, is to be very simple so officers can get in and get out really fast. So if you think of all the other apps on your phone, they're designed to be engaging and they want people to keep looking. You kind of want your officers to sort of move away from the app and get back to what they're doing. So that's the intent behind the UI. So then the next bit is capturing vehicle information, and so we might not know what that vehicle is, or we decided we do. We can take a photo of the vehicle, so we've got evidence in there straight away, and there is a lot of information. You can see vehicle information, description, flags, travel information, involvement, substances, basically your whole accident report that you would normally do inside your record management system, condensed and put it onto there. The next bit is associating an occupant to the vehicle, and so within here, this is where you would be able to, once again, take a photo of the occupant. In the name information, you can go and scan a driver's license, and so if your driver's license has information about that person's name in it, in the barcode, all of that gets pre-populated into the form, and that's where I was talking about earlier, trying to save time for that officer in the field. Okay, and also the little search icon represents the fact that it's connected to your record management system. So you'd also be able to do queries back to your record management system and say, oh, who is this person? They've given me their identity, and what else do I know about them? The next bit is to add a location and narrative. So the great thing about a phone is it has GPS, and if you hit that little pin button at the top, it populates the GPS coordinates straight away. I acknowledge the fact that accidents don't literally happen sometimes where you happen to be standing, so that's all free text fields. So you can edit that location information, but it's a really fast way to get it in there, and then you don't have to type in a bunch of stuff. And then finally, and you would have, if you saw the keynote this morning, you would have seen the capturing of the narrative. And that was a lesson that I had learned from New Zealand Police, where they told me, we have officers, it's nighttime, it's raining, they have a small phone, the fingers on the phone, it's not a very pleasant experience. And so we thought about that and said, okay, we'll put voice dictation in there. It takes a bit of time and a bit of training, it's the one inbuilt into your phone, but it works really well. And once you've practiced it, it goes really fast. And there's obviously the capture of that photo evidence. So you can go in, you can add the photos, or you can add a video and attach that as part of your record. And remember, all of this stuff goes straight into your record management system. Cool. Okay, and so at the other end of that, this is what it looks like. So we've put a vehicle in there, And then we've associated the vehicle to occupants. So there's a driver, there could be passengers, there could be additional vehicles involved with a crash, there could be pedestrians or witnesses, and location. So the UI is very straightforward, which I'm really proud of. I think it's really clear to understand what makes up that report. Okay, so then the next part of this is capturing the accident diagram. And so if you are using an Android tablet or an iPad, we have the ability to capture an accident diagram. We looked, and I looked particularly hard into, can you do this on a mobile phone? And we realized that the form factor was really difficult to add and drag and drop all of this functionality on a phone. If you can imagine, the menu would take up half the screen. So we said, okay, this is a tablet feature. And in it you can, I think this is a laser pointer. Nope. And then in it you can add symbols down the side. So those symbols include obviously vehicles, trees, people, anything that you would see at a roadside accident. As you might have seen in the keynote, it includes some stuff that is a little bit over the top, like planes and things. But it's all in there. And then once you've added the road, you would start to add the vehicles, as I've drawn in this diagram. You can change the attributes, such as the color of the vehicle, the size of the vehicle, and then you would add scenery, such as trees or other sort of roadside accessories that may have been involved in that accident. And I remember talking to a police officer in New Zealand, and they were saying, at an accident, they used to like rip the accident report into different pages and give one page to one officer and give another page to another officer, and they'd all be scribbling these diagrams, and they couldn't read the diagrams. Like the other person was like, oh, what bit did you mean by this stuff? Versus this is really clear and succinct. So that was the motivator behind having accident diagrams in there. All right, so we're about halfway through. The next bit is citations. And so for me, citations is really important. That's where New Zealand Police gained a lot of benefit as well. And you can reuse a person from the accident. So we spent all that time capturing that person's information. Now when we go into citation, it's already in the app. We just pick the same person and they're already in there. And then once we pick that person, we would go through and we'd add details of the charge. So that could be the violation or ordinance or court or fee amount or comments. And you know, those things would obviously be, the order of that stuff and the information on there would be specific to your organisation. Okay, and so basically we've gone through, we've added a person that we'd already captured, we'd added a vehicle that we'd already captured, and then we would be able to just click that little charge button down there and we'd add the charge as well. And so if you imagine you're at that roadside, there was that drunk driver, we captured their details and then we reused them all, and that's really fast. As a side note, the amount of time it took New Zealand Police to do citations used to be around 25 minutes at the roadside. Once they moved to an all-digital process, it went down to 5 minutes. And they could have more of a conversation around the safety and security of what that person was doing, and less of a conversation around, let me gather your data and let me give you, your citation. Field interviews, and you may note a repeating pattern in my presentation because it's the same thing. It's another type of report. You go through and once again, you add a person to the field interview, you add a vehicle, you add a location. This is all stuff that we have just done. You add a narrative and an attachment. So it's pretty much like a booking, but it's without the charge. And this is a really quick way to gather information in the field. You're interviewing a witness, you just want to know, what did you see? And so, yeah, you can go through and do that. So basically, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, what do you think would be the workflows that would make Intergraph on Duty a must-have for a must-have product for your organisation? And I have a feeling that I know what the answer might be, but if you could put your hand up, I'm just going to say there's 3 things: evidence capture, incident reports, I had a suspicion that incident reports may win, and printing of citations. So if you could put your hand up for number 1, who thinks evidence capture should be our next area of focus? All right, so we've got, okay. And then the next one is incident reports. Who thinks that incident reports should be in there? Okay, a pretty clear trend in there. It's a bit of a trick question because we're developing the printing of citations anyway, so that's coming up soon. Okay, so the takeaway that I've gotten from the audience is incident reports needs to be something that I should be focusing on. Is there anything, hey, here's a bit of free time. Is there anything else that you think is like a burning desire, if you want to say it out to me now, or we can wait until afterwards? All right. So, the next bit is how does this fit into our environment? So how does it fit with other workflows? How does it fit with our other apps? And how does it fit into the technical environment? So I talked about this a little bit earlier on, but basically mobile responder or MPS is responsible for getting you to that event, doing that dispatch and en routing and arriving. On-duty resolve is really around data capture of reports in the field. So the workflows that leverage the mobile devices out of the car, it's not a mobile RMS. So you still have to have an RMS, but it's a data capture tool that allows you to do all this stuff in the field. And it's not specifically for web RMS. I acknowledge that a lot of customers around the world are using record management systems that are not hexagons, and that's okay. So we have the ability to connect it to other record management systems via some services and integration work, but you know, we've obviously concentrated on web RMS to have a good experience out of the box. And I think that, and this is obviously a bit where I have been doing a little bit of research, but I think that long reports, like if it's really detailed or it's quite massive, are probably that are better completed with a laptop, are likely to stay inside of the record management system. So if you're in the field, you're away from your car or your laptop, that's where on-duty plays a role. But if you're going to complete your whole incident report and it's pages and pages and pages, often a keyboard is easier to type and do that stuff with, so you're going to spend your time doing that in, I think, your record management system. Okay, so basically, the next bit is what is the differences between field-based reporting, mobile for public safety, mobile responder, compared to on-duty resolve? And the answer is, Intergraph on-duty resolve is report, not dispatch focus. It's, if you remember that big picture around the connected officer, it's that sort of resolving all the reporting you need to do at the event. So on-duty resolve, resolving the report. It's designed for a smartphone or a tablet, so an iPad, Android tablet, iPhone, and it has a clear, simple, and fast user interface. So there isn't a laptop version of it. It's really around consumer devices, and the reason why is because consumer devices are a lot cheaper in the field. When I have a look at the Panasonic Toughbooks, they're really tough, but they're like 4 times the price of an iPad. And you have to consider the cost of rolling this out to your organization, and so that's the focus. And as a mobile solution, it's detached from the car and can be carried by an officer in the field. And for me, that's that distinction between mobilizing the unit or mobilizing the vehicle and mobilizing the officer. And so if you mobilize the officer, even though you might have multiple officers in a unit, they can be in different areas and they can still have access to information rather than having to radio. Okay. So how does this fit into your technical environment? And the answer is we're focusing on this as software as a service, and I want to premise this is I understand that there are concerns, regulatory concerns around your data, and sometimes software as a service may not gel well with your regulatory concerns. So I don't want to just be like, hey, it's all SaaS and that's kind of it. I'm aware of that sort of stuff, and I'm going through the process of thinking about how we're going to sort of deal with that. But the advantage of software as a service is we look after those back-end servers. We patch them, we maintain them, and we upgrade them. And so what's the point? What's the value? It's that we want to keep you up to date. And it's really, for us to keep you up to date, if we're patching and maintaining and managing that server, it means that as new functionality comes on board, you get access to it. That's the whole intent of software as a service, is that you pay a monthly fee or you pay a recurring fee, and as new functionality gets added, then you have that ability to take advantage of that. And I've talked a little bit about this, but I just wanted to emphasize again that it's designed to connect to your RMS. So it supports Intergraph, In Pursuit Web RMS straight out of the box, and it can integrate to other record management systems with consulting services. And that's really just around saying, well, here's the data structure of your report, and here's the fields that we have, and here's your record management system, and there's, you know, some integrating middleware to kind of glue those things together. And I think this is a good story. This acknowledges that your technical environment may not just be hexagons. And you might be using our CAD system, but you might be using a different record management system. Well, then that's fine. You can still take advantage of this mobile app and take advantage of workflows that will eventually span from dispatch to reporting. Cool. Okay, so I'm really interested in this kind of SaaS question. Different organizations have kind of a different maturity around SaaS. And what I'd like to know is, sort of in a nutshell, is your organization in a position, and that could be regulatory, it could be management, it could be technical, to adopt SaaS? And rather than these questions here, I think what I'm going to do is just do a show of hands, which is, would your organization, are you willing to adopt something SaaS-like in this space in the next 24 months? So 24 months or probably a little bit later on. So I'm going to say, anyone in the next 24 months? Okay, so about a third the audience has said that. And I presume 24 months plus, I'm hoping the other 2/3 of the audience is, I'm getting some head shakes. Okay, right. So I think that shows is that as we develop these features, we need to be aware of that. We want to reduce the cost of deployment. Technology takes ages and costs a lot to do this deployment. When it's SaaS, we can really help out in that space. Hey, we're nearly at the end, which is quite good. Keeping on time, I'm probably running a little fast, but what I wanted to talk, there's only, let's see, there's only a couple more slides to go. So availability and next steps. The plan is we will be launching this around Q4 of this year. It will support iOS and Android devices, both iPhones and iPads, Android tablets and Android phones. It will have out-of-the-box support for WebRMS 3.7, and it can integrate with other record management systems, but we'd have a little bit of a chat about that. So that's kind of like the key actions if you're wondering, hey, when can we touch it? And what's on the horizon? So I spend a lot of my time thinking about what is consuming officers' time in the field. And when I was talking to some fire customers yesterday, I was thinking, well, hey, can any of this stuff apply to fire? And the answer was, well, for one of the fire customers I was talking to, when a fire has finished and you bring in an investigator who has to go and say, well, what caused the fire? What was the accelerant? You know, all of that. They were doing all of that by hand. You know, they're just writing notes and then going back to, you know, the station and filling that in. Well, an incident report is kind of the same thing. You're still capturing information about that incident, and the ability to put that straight into your record management system means you don't have to do transcription, no one has to take notes and retype them in, they're straight into your record management system, and people can be kept up to date faster about that. Same as an EMS. So as you're going through, and you may be attending an accident, you want to know information about that person, the people that have been involved in that accident. You might want to know any of those conditions that are associated with that event, which could be, were they on any particular medications or things like that. So the concept around on duty and resolving all the paperwork you need to do at an event or just afterwards equally applies to fire and EMS. And if you are a fire or EMS customer, definitely come up to me and talk to me about that stuff. I kind of have a bit of a police bent because I spent a little bit of time working with New Zealand Police, so I really want to know what fire and EMS use cases could look like. And so then, the areas, the bits that I'm most interested in is where you have to do evidence capture, because it takes a lot of time. And how do you use a cell phone or a tablet to make that faster? You know, I talked about the voice, and I talked about the GPS, and I talked about the camera. Those are some ways you can do it. Yeah, and also I'm interested in knowing what other things would be of benefit in your organisation inside a mobile reporting style of app. And a good example of this in New Zealand Police is their focus on domestic violence and family harm. And so the stats off the top of my head is 40% of New Zealand Police's call-outs are related to domestic violence. And they believe that only 50% of them are actually being reported. So there's a huge, unfortunate demand for response to domestic violence type events, and the information you have to capture is very detailed. Who's involved, what is their relationship, were there any children, and what's happened? And so that style of workflow that you have to do then and there can be captured really easily in the app. One thing that I saw in the New Zealand Police app that was just blew me away is they ask questions such as, what has this person done to you? What, do you feel threatened? And they get the person who's involved, the victim, to answer that on the phone. So the police officer hands the phone over and says, can you answer this? And you can translate it into different languages. So if you have people in the community who, English isn't their first language, then they have the ability to answer those questions, to be involved in the process, and to feel safe about answering those questions without having to speak it when that person might be in the room next door. So that's kind of some of the things I see on the horizon where we can go to from this. And hopefully those are quite exciting ideas. Okay, so I think this is my final quiz. I know I've been a little bit low-tech in my quizzing, but what I wanted to ask you is, does Intergraph On Duty hit the sweet spot for mobile law enforcement functionality? And so the answer is, there's probably going to be two, and it's yes, it looks great, or it's okay but some things are missing, or it's not what it needs to be. So the first one, show of hands, I won't take it personally, is the first one. Yes, it looks great. All right, so I've got maybe like a third, maybe a quarter to a third. My boss is in the audience, I'm going to say a third. Okay, the second one is it's okay but some things are missing. All right, so that's a good majority. I'd say probably half. For those people who just raised their hands, if I said it had incident reports in it, would your hand still be raised? I'm guessing, right, okay. And then the third one is it's not what we need it to be. So, hey, if I missed the mark completely, now's your chance to put your hand up and let me know. All right, okay, so it sounds like I'm on the right path, and there's a little bit more around that investigatory stuff, the incident stuff, which is what I suspected. Okay, so it was a really fast presentation. There's about sort of 5 or 10 minutes if you want to ask questions. But yeah, basically we did the keynote recap, we talked a little bit about what it was, we talked about how did we get here and the motivations behind it, and you can see that kind of really clear focus on capturing evidence in the field. We talked about how it fits into your landscape, and we talked about software as a service, and we talked about why, for me, I think that's important around reducing costs and giving you new features faster, because the world's moving faster. And we also talked about what will become available and sort of the next steps. So I think that, and the thing that I've been asked to definitely emphasize, and I would like you to be there, is there's going to be a roundtable discussion around mobile apps for policing. And I'd probably also talk about just more broadly around public safety. And so that's really where I can chat about what's happening in an app space, what about different technologies that apply to apps, so the use of voice interfaces, things like Siri, whatever happened to Google Glasses, and also the other important side is organizational change management. So I think sometimes technology companies talk a lot about technology, but for this stuff to be successful in your organization, you need to have like an organizational change program that gets people familiar with mobilizing the officer. How do you get them to all have a phone? How do you get them to use the phone? How do you get them to not forget about it in the car? How do you get them to start slowly onboarding themselves? What about people who don't use who aren't using smartphones in their day-to-day life? How do you get those people on board? And so those are some of the things that we'll sit around, we'll have some lunch, we'll have a chat. And so that's going to be in Titian, 2204 at 12:30. And so there is a session survey. If you and I'd appreciate it if you guys could sometime go into the Hexagon Live mobile app and complete that feedback. If it's really good, then I'm sure I will tell my boss. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you for listening. Before we sort of wrap up, and we're a little bit early, are there any questions from the audience that you're like, hey, I'd really like to know about this or that? Cool. Oh, come on down. Hopefully all this stuff still works. Okay.
I would like to know if it's going to integrate with FBR, so if they can start a report in FBR. I know we're not talking incidents, but accident citations, specifically accidents, especially in California, it's very specific. Could they start it via app and then continue on FBR?
It's a good question. I would say that, it's definitely a use case that I've pondered, I've thought about a little, but I haven't probably gone into as much detail as I need to. So I'm going to put it down on my task list of what I should look into. Because I know that FBR and on-duty resolve play in the same sort of space. It's just FBR's in-car, it's has offline capability. That's where you do these complex reports. And the goal of this is to kind of capture information in the field. Once you've captured it, you submit it straight into your record management system. So I have to double check, and you'll see me in the zone, so I'll get back to you on it.
So a second question is, as far as offline, online, does the mobile still have the availability? If you're in a dead spot, you capture information and syncs back up the minute you get back online? How does that piece work?
Yeah, so what happens is when you're on the phone, if you have coverage, that's where you can do your queries to your record management system for persons and vehicles. If you don't have coverage, you can't do that. But you can still capture all that information. It's all on the phone, it's cached on the phone, and then you can hit save and save it as a draft, which leaves it on the phone. As soon as you hit the little paper plane icon, that's when it gets submitted to the record management system. And once it's in there, then it can be accessed the same way as any other report. Yeah. Cool. Hello.
Will you be looking for agencies to test it when it's ready?
So the question was, are there agencies looking for testing? So just recently I had an internal email around what our process for that sort of stuff would look like. So I'm going to look in it in a little bit more detail, and I'll get your details. And so if you're interested in this stuff, let me know, because then I'll have a list of customers. Thank you. I'll have a list of customers who are really, appreciate that, who are really keen, and then I can tell my boss and say, hey, look, here's where we can spend some focus.
We haven't gone live with FBR yet, and are planning to probably first quarter 19, but I think this will be an easier pill to swallow from the field operations side, but I'm very curious how they would work in tandem, or if FBR is going to be going away completely and on-duty is going to be a solution. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a bit more of a story about that a little bit later on. Cool. Any other questions? I'm kind of mobile. Oh, hello.
What's your typical integration time if the RMS is not in a graph app RMS?
Oh, that's a good question as well.
Can you say that question louder?
Oh yeah, so the question was, how long would it take to do integration with non-web RMS record management systems? So that could be niche, or it could be, I don't know, there's some others floating about.
Have you done an integration with niche?
No, so at the moment, because this is just a technical preview, we haven't done that integration. We have, so our services areas have done integration to niche before for things like business intelligence. So we're aware of the data structure. And so we'd kind of leverage that and say, okay, well, here's your data structure that we already are aware of, and here's what's in the reporting, you'd tell us what's in it. So we're not starting at day zero, but there'd be a bit of time involved. I don't know the exact answer at the moment. Cool. Oh, hello.
Yeah, for the diagramming, do you have templates? Can you add custom templates for common intersections that are frequently colliding?
It's a good question. So that was templating in the accident diagramming. Is there examples of common intersections? And the answer is yes. So, and if you see me in the zone, I'll be able to show you that, but there's like a list of about sort of 10 or so types of intersections, and that's...
Add your own.
Yeah, oh, so,
add your own custom.
I'll have to double check with you. I know it has a bunch in it, but I'll have to look. So there you go.
Time saver.
Yeah, I guess there would be these common types of intersections, and if they're in there, that would be good. Okay, so adding your own intersections, I'll take that as a thing. Anything else? Oh, hello.
Regarding templates, are you able to import Google Map photos of intersections, things along those lines? Or is that going to, go ahead.
So at the moment, no, but I understand why that's important, to have that intersection, to show the actual roading layout and stuff like that. So it's on my to-do list, is thinking about how to make that happen.
Okay, a couple of quick other questions. As far as the, say, in your example, the automobiles, is it pick list, is it freeform, is it both?
Yeah, so the list of automobiles, the question is, what was the automobile list? It is, it's a list. So you go, basically it shows you all the types of automobiles, so a small, compact, an SUV, or whatever, and you drag them over, and then you would add your colouring and descriptions on that.
Okay, will there be a freeform field where you can add, specific notes, like a new model of a vehicle comes out and we want that model, but it's not in the pick list?
The iconography of so it's really just like sedan, so then I would say you would drag that on, and then if you wanted to, you'd add a note on the diagram that says this was the 2018 Ford Explorer or whatever.
Okay. And then other templates as far as, for domestic violence, 5150, or, people that were taken to the hospital for reasons, would there be form field templates that you could put into this type of application?
So that would be, the question was around templating for capturing, sorry?
It's question specific.
Oh, right.
So in California, we have certain questions we have to ask.
Right, so like a questionnaire that's mandatory, you have to ask these types of questions. I'm in the process of gathering those sorts of requirements.
Okay.
So
that's
yeah, it's kind of mandatory is the support for those types of questionnaires. Cool, okay. I think we're probably a bit out of time, so I just want to wrap it up and say thank you for attending. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you found this valuable, and yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.